The Millennium Film Journal was first published in 1978, founded by the Millennium Film Workshop in New York. It was established to provide critical writing and documentation for experimental avant-garde and artists' moving image works. It continues to publish biannual by its senior editor Grahame Weinbren, covering film, video and digital media. Thank you for your attention.
I'm going to be speaking today to Mr. Grahame Weinbren. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Joey.
Graham, I had reached out to you a while back. We've known each other for a long time, but I wanted to do an interview basically to have an oversight, an overview of your career, both as a senior editor and just as a film artist and as an artist. I've always had a lot of respect for you, and find you to be one of the most important figures in experimental film in New York. Although you are an internationally known figure. I guess I have a couple of drafted notes, almost like a map quest, sort of like a guide of where to direct this informal conversation. I kind of want to begin at the beginning, as far as where your formative years as an artist. Do you feel that you sort of discovered yourself as an artist in South Africa, which is your place of birth, I believe, or in London, which I believe we've spoken in the past that we both have this relationship with Bromley, London. Where do you think you discovered that you were an artist, and could you speak about those formative years?
Can I start by saying that really I'm not the kind of artist who thinks about his career. And I don't think about the past very much. I'm really forward-looking, thinking about what I'm working on right now. I'll have a lot of gaps. I can kind of guess at these things, but it's not. I know there are artists who are really very clear on their trajectory. I'm really not. It's both forgotten and, not thought about. But I'll tell you what I can think about. First of all, I left South Africa with my parents when I was 4 years old. So I don't really think a lot about that, although there is a picture on my wall of me at 3 um, in South Africa. Um,
Behind you? It's behind you, the photo?
yes, I wonder if I can get out of the way so you can see
Yeah,
it.
could you show it? I can't see it. Could you bring it to the camera?
It's stuck on the wall. It's
Oh,
glued to the wall.
where? Point at it.
I
Point at it.
think it's
You have a
I
lot of photos on the wall
can't
there.
find my well, yes, I set myself up so that I would be in front of my
You have a gallery there, Graham. Yeah.
yes, it's
Where
right.
is it?
I can send you a picture of it that you can use. It's
Sure,
that's
sure.
on there. Yeah, it's off screen. It's off screen.
Okay,
It's below the
okay,
screen.
okay.
It's a picture of me that my mother took when I was
Three.
a child
Yeah.
and on a seesaw. And I open my mouth, and there's a bubble coming out of my mouth, and it's the
Okay.
only picture I have of my own, the only picture I save of my own past.
Okay. A seesaw, not a helter-skelter. It was a seesaw.
Seesaw.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I remember those. Yeah. So then art was not a part of your life in South Africa, clearly. Then you went to, did you go first to Bromley with your family, London, or just London in general? Tell me about that.
Okay, so my father's an activist in South Africa. Of course, it was a very rough time in South Africa. It was racist.
Mm.
And it was officially racist. I mean, it was official. That was the laws were prejudiced against people who were indigenous and dark-skinned, of course. And my parents had moved there during early colonial times, being the beginning of the 19th century. Their parents had moved there, escaping other crisis areas as Jews in Europe in the beginning of the century when there were a lot of pogroms and stuff in Lithuania. This is my father's side, so they'd gone there. He somehow he became radicalized when he was about 15.
Mm.
Um, and I've been trying, while he was alive, I interviewed him, tried to ask him how he realized when he was surrounded by racism everywhere and it was official part of the country, how did he realize that he was different and against it when he was 15 years old? And he could never give me an answer, but he told me a few stories, which I've used in pieces. Um, and they decided they did not want their children to grow up in racist South Africa. So they figured out a way to move. My father got a job, a scholarship in London, and they moved there in the early 50s. And yeah, so and they moved from racist South Africa to Britain, who was, of course, a colonialist country at the time, having doing terrible things all over Africa, trying to suppress the people who are trying to get away from the yoke of British colonialism. And Britain, my father somehow thought was free of these issues, which it was not. But anyway, so we moved to Britain, um, and they didn't have a community really. My father had a job. He was in a field, but my mother didn't know of anybody, and it was just after the Second World War. And so, really, my mother was alone mostly for that time. And we moved from place to place because my parents could not figure out the money. I mean, how much money they had to cover rent. So by the time I was 12, I think we lived in something like 20 places.
Hmm.
But they're interested in keeping me and my younger brothers at that time in the same school. So we tended to move around areas in northwest London, rented flats from one to another. And finally, by the time I was 13, they decided to move to the suburbs. They moved to Bromley, bought a house, moved to Bromley, and from I guess the age of 13 or 14 until I started college, my parents lived in Bromley.
Well, that's interesting, Graham, because we had spoken about the Roma gypsies in Bromley and the protests that were taking place. So it sounds like your entry into Bromley, it was roughly around the same age as your father. You said he was 15 when sort of was someone who was an activist, and you sort of landed in Bromley. And I imagine you were first time being exposed, or maybe not the first time, but you were exposed to direct uh, protests and activism in that suburb. Am I correct about that with the gypsies and what was going on there with the
That
travelers?
wasn't quite the story. I was in school, and it was the big time of the campaign for nuclear disarmament, trying to prevent Britain from developing its own nuclear weapons, trying to get nuclear American bases, which had houses nuclear weapons, off the British Isles. And I just got involved with friends who would go on the marches and so on from when I was about 13. I have to say, it wasn't incredibly well thought out. I mean, I still would have the same opinions, but they weren't very well thought opinions. But it was a community. It was a very great community that I could join, get away from my school friends. It was a very snobby kind of school, and um, and go on these marches. And I became involved with the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, the CND was called, which invented the peace flag, the
Oh,
C and D in Morse in that kind of code that uses flags. And I went on marches, and gradually that kind of group of activists began to work on different issues. Um, and a number of them became interested in the Romani, who were there in London and disliked by everybody. um, and accused of being thieves and so on. And so they would get moved off that. They would be the caravans would be settled on the land, and then the government would come and pull them off and move them off, drag them away. And one of the groups that I was involved in would go and try and prevent that from happening. I was not very heavily involved in it, but my friends were, and I knew them well, and I would go a couple of times and watch. But no, it wasn't a big part of my. I mean, we just discussed it because you were interested in it, and I had a connection with it. But
Yeah,
yes.
well, and Bromley, although a suburb, it's quite they call it was it Leafy Bromley? It's a small, it's almost like a village. It's small, and I imagine you were exposed to this. When I was there, I was exposed to it, and that was maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's
Yeah.
still prevalent, that controversy. The now, how about the arts? I mean, did you go to shows, let's say like in the Chiselhurst Caves? I think they were doing a lot of music performances and whatnot.
One of the interesting thing about Bromley is it became a kind of center for rock and roll musicians. Many of them,
Bowie.
David Bowie was there, and many groups. The Animals were based there. There were many big groups that were based there, and they would have shows in clubs and so on, and in the caves. And there are many little places like that. And many of my friends were in rock and roll groups at the time. None of them were successful. Some of them became very successful, and yeah. So that was one of the centers. It was kind of it was kind of a largish town in a way. And somehow, because it became a kind of youth center for people all around Southeast London, they would come and hang out in Bromley on the weekends, and yeah, and I had a lot of friends, and we would meet at night and things like that. Yeah, and I would go to the CND meetings where a lot of my friends were, and we would demonstrate against the Vietnam War and so on. Yeah, okay, so that was that story. As for the arts, my family was always interested in the arts, and we spent a lot of time in museums. And I kind of discovered film when I was given a 8 millimeter camera for my 15th birthday. And I started I sort of used it, and I looked at films, and I was still under the kind of mistaken idea that films were primarily a storytelling medium,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously not true. Um, I mean, in the real world, in the
Mm-hmm.
real world, it is true, but in actual, if you think about the actual aesthetics of cinema, they're not very good at telling stories. They always tell the same one. So gradually over time, I began to use my 8 millimeter camera in different ways, and I didn't really get involved with, I guess, didn't see any experimental films or anything like that for a couple of years, probably till I started college. Um, then I began to see experimental films and went to them, and began to kind of yes, I began to make my own films, I guess, around I was 19, but I was still under the mistaken idea that films had to tell stories. Uh,
Do you remember any of the first things you were enamored with the camera? What did you shoot? Do you remember any of the first images that you were
I, sh- I,
drawn
sh-
to?
I do remember. I don't think they exist anymore, but I remember shooting um, moving sculptures, metal sculptures that were in the parks that would blow in the wind in different ways, and I capturing them on the camera. I said, but well, it wasn't much. I mean, I don't have them. I wouldn't show them. But the movement of natural objects kind of caught my eye. That first thing, the first thing.
Hmm. So
And
the
music. I was always interested in music because I was a violinist. So I was
oh,
always interested in music, and I was interested in contemporary music and so on. And I was interested in combining musical ideas with cinema very early.
hmm. So when would you say you made your first actual film that was screened in front of an audience, even if it was a small audience at college or whatnot? Do you remember what that was?
I made I got together with Roberta at CalArts, and we made a number of films together. Now, the first thing we did is we got involved with the avant-garde music group on the campus in Buffalo. because I
Hmm.
was going to graduate school in Buffalo, and they had a group called the Creative Associates, and it was a group of avant-garde musicians sponsored by the university in the music department, and they would do quite advanced and interesting pieces by the composers. And somehow we got involved in doing visuals for some of their work.
Hmm.
And uh,
This is before Erl King. This is before of that.
yeah, yeah,
Way before that.
many years before. Okay, yeah,
Mid 70s. This would be mid 70s or early
early 70s,
70s.
early 70s, yeah.
Early 70s.
Actually, late 60s, I think, late 60s.
Okay.
Think, yeah, I can't, as I say, I
And I
can't.
think you were a philosophy major. Is that correct? You went there to study philosophy, or am I wrong about that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, I studied philosophy. I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew I wasn't going to make money, so I thought I needed it. This is the most one of the most stupid ideas I ever had. Um, I wanted to make a living, and I thought I could be a philosophy professor,
Okay.
and I would have time when I was a philosophy professor to do what I really wanted to do, which was to make films. Um, and so yeah, I got a degree in philosophy, and I got philosophy jobs.
Yeah.
The first one was at CalArts,
Yeah.
um, and all the time I was
Uh,
making.
uh, just real quick, so when did you cross over the ocean? When did you go to you came from London to Cal Arts, you went to California before New York, because California and New York are quite a distance, and then also so is London. So where'd
I
you
was
land first?
I was in New York for the summer, and I don't know what year it was, and I didn't know I didn't want to go back to Britain. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I had an undergraduate degree in philosophy, so I applied to graduate school for a few places in philosophy.
Okay.
Um, I wasn't very good at it, but I went to an excellent department in London at the University of London. Everybody knew all the professors there, and I got a great scholarship at in Buffalo to go to graduate school, and they supported me entirely, and had to do a little teaching, and so that's what I did.
So s- after Buffalo, in a way, you made a conscious or maybe unconscious decision to remain in New York, to be to that would be your place, New York, and find work, eventually working as an editor in New York.
I went from Buffalo to my first job was at CalArts, um, and yeah, I taught in the humanities department at CalArts, so teaching art
Yeah,
students how to think about things as teaching them philosophy, and I met some very people who became absolutely superstar artists who were in my class in CalArts, and then I lost the job.
yeah.
And I went and I got some jobs in California still teaching, and then I came to New York.
You did something that I find very unique, and a lot of people don't speak about this. And in general, people who are in the experimental arts or in the avant-garde or in the underground arts, uh, sometimes work in the industry to make a living, to pay bills as an editor. I know some people, I don't know if it was you. I know Iris Khan was one person who worked as an editor for Saturday Night Live and immediately was on a steam deck after skits, I think, overnight, spending the entire night cutting skits while the show was going on. And I know you eventually worked. For Alphabet City was one example of a corporate job that you got, and Pat O'Neill would be another example of an experimental artist who did work on a Tank Girl, a Hollywood movie, Piranha. I mean, he did all this while continuing to be a very important and relevant experimental film artist. So I find that very interesting and inspiring. People like you took that direction rather than hang frames in a museum. Nothing wrong with that, but some people just refuse to participate in getting these corporate jobs.
It sounds a little nutty now, but I don't think I had the unique idea that the connection that the one there wasn't much of a connection between being an artist and making money. Money and art did not really belong together, and was certainly not the only person that thought that. And so we lived. We knew we had to get day jobs. We all knew we had to get day jobs, whatever they were. Yeah, hanging frames in pictures, hanging in pictures in galleries or whatever. Um, I discovered when I first started editing, I think I was still in graduate school actually, that it really suited me. It was something, it was like making, I felt as if it was like making music and it gave me a lot of satisfaction. Um, and actually my film work has always turned around editing. So, and somehow, and I don't remember how it happened, it must have been a friend, got me a job. Um, uh, I think I think there was a company that they were working for. If I could see if I can remember this right. I think they were shooting for the Saudi Arabia government about the that that pilgrim that they all make to the what is it, the Hajj?
Pilgrimage. Sure. Yes.
Yes, and so thousands and thousands of people, and it's a very important thing, and the the Saudi Arabia government runs it, and somehow they commissioned this company to make a film about it.
Mm.
And the company charged them a huge amount of money, and they sent four cameramen and everything. But they and the government, the people who commissioned them, wanted to see what they'd shot. And of course, they'd shot overshot, and they had thousands of hours of footage. So they wanted somebody to basically make selects.
Cut the fat off of it. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't even cutting the fat, but making selects out of it. And I'd never had a commercial editing job, and it wasn't even was not on a Steenbeck. It was on an upright moviola. Um,
Wow.
but and there was no sound. But
Wow.
you know, somehow I was very underpaid. But somebody said a friend or somebody kind of introduced me to them, and I said, yeah, I could do it. So I basically pulled four reels and I showed it to them, and the producer sat over my shoulder and made notes as if I was editing. Yeah, that was my first job, um, and it was paid pretty well. And I realized that yeah, I can do this. I was teaching philosophy and at that time as well. And I just, yeah, I kind of, and it worked out well. And they recommended me to somebody else, and there I was on the road of, being a commercial film editor, and also using this skills that I developed to make my own films. Um,
Yeah.
and this was by that time I was with Roberta. We were at Cal Arts. She was in the graduate school. I was in the humanities department, and we started making films. And the first film we made together that was shown was called The Making of Americans,
Mm.
and it was based on Gertrude Stein texts.
That
Um,
was late 70s, 78, I think that was.
no, much earlier.
Oh, it was earlier. Wow.
Yeah, we were still at Cal Arts, so it
Oh,
was
wow.
73.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
then
we are older than you think, obviously.
Mhm. and then
We-
and then came Erl King, which is part of the permanent collection at Guggenheim. Can you speak about Erl King? Because Erl King was when you and Roberta sort of started doing more of an interactive cinema that even now, I mean, you did letters, which kind of reminds me of this same style of interactive cinema. If you could speak about Erl King and how that landed at the Guggenheim.
we had four women read passages from Gertrude Stein, and we made a kind of musical multi-screen, not multi-screen, on a single screen, multi-image piece, many windows of them all reading passages from Gertrude Stein, and
Interesting.
made it into a kind of music of the poetry and a kind of a feminist position. And that was, and yeah, it was shown at Ann Arbor. It was the first film we made, and it got a bit of play because it was in the right political environment, I think. Roberta likes that film a lot. I'm not so crazy about it, but we made a good half dozen films together in that period between between about 72 and I guess the early 80s. And they're out there. They're out there. They Bertha's Children seems to be a huge favorite. It's played all over the world all the time. It's yeah, yeah. So they are films that I think are very dependent on editing and very much treating the cinematic medium as a kind of musical form where you could organize it as you would organize a piece of classical music, basically. Different themes would emerge and then they would overlap and move into something else and really and actually absolutely narrative free, but still structured in time. So those films were made between 72 and I think 1980, and there's a set of them. Um, and they're in the Academy collection, through Mark Toscano. He has them all preserved, and yeah.
Mm,
Although of course we lost the original. Um,
mm.
we lost the originals, so he had to make them out of prints, because I don't think Roberta feels like this, but I was not. I thought you make it and you do it and then you walk away and go on to the next thing. As I say, I'm not that interested in developing this kind of continuous history career.
Yeah.
The idea of the career is not something that appeals to me. But then, so I was working as a film editor in various different jobs, and I was doing pretty well. Iris and I were co-editors on a science show. Um, can't remember what it was called, but it was a science television show made up of short pieces. Um, and Iris was in one room, I was in another room. There were about Sam Pollard was in another room. A lot of people who are now quite well known were working on this thing. And one day, this man came in and he's looking for an innovative and crazy idea. I was known as a kind of, innovative because I treated cinema in a different way than thinking of the narrative line. And it's no, you can notice it in the work. I mean, I even did it for this show that was called Omni. That was the name of the show. Um, he came around. He was looking for somebody to make the first public interactive project. There was no interactivity. There was no internet. Um, and the project was for the 1982 World's Fair, which was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it was on energy. The subject was energy. And so he came around, he talked to a lot of different people, and he hired me. There was no such thing as an interactive designer. He thought the most appropriate person to do this work, because there were no models, was a film editor.
Mm.
So I got the job. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell it so that it's on
Sure.
your on this thing that we're doing together.
Yeah.
Um, I walked into this offices in Midtown on 53rd Street. They were a design firm, big important design firm, and they'd been given the commission for the United States Pavilion of the Knoxville World's Fair on energy. And I walked in, and there on the wall, a huge wall, were maybe 400 reels of industrial energy films, made to teach people how to use the tools in the industry, how to load pipes into nuclear power stations, a whole wall of these things. That was the material I could use to make 10 interactive stations without really any ideas what an interactive station was. There was no model for it. The models they were working, these guys had hired the guys from MIT, the Architectural Machine Group at MIT, who were actually working with Laserdisc and making things like there was a piece. It was the a map of a town that you could drive through and go into any of the buildings. This is a very famous first piece. There was how to fix a bicycle. That was another piece. So,
That's great.
but they couldn't hire MIT to do the actual job of making the interactive stations for the World's Fair because they didn't finish pieces. They made demos. And
Mm.
you would go, and I did this, you would go and look at their demo, like the Aspen map you could drive through and you'd be on a screen and you could kind of drive through it and go into buildings. But they had to stand next to you because no, no, you can't turn down that one, or you can't go into this building. And that so the people who made the software and it would crash and they would fix it. I mean, they didn't work, but the idea was they were was of course a government military government project and heavily sponsored. And all they could do was make demos. And of course, for the World's Fair, this was the first interactive video pieces open to the public.
Mm,
And so they had to work and they
mm,
had to make sense. And so, and they had no ideas of design, really none. I mean, so I thought to myself, well, what I should do, I should use editing. I should use film editing. So my initial concept is you're looking at a kind of montage of all the different forms of energy it goes by on the screen. And it was touchscreen. You can touch anyone and you go up and see a little more detail about that. And the more you touched, the more detail you got until you got a screen full of text.
mm.
And if you stopped touching, it would go back to the montage at the beginning. So it was, and my idea was that every time anybody touched, it was a good edit. So it was as if that we were in a film environment, and this has in a way been my concept ever since. They would be in a film environment and they could wander through it in a way that made sense to them. And the MIT guys did not like this idea, but they had to do what we told them. And so, and then we made. I had to hire all my friends and everybody I knew because the deadline was in 6 months and we had nothing. Um, the opening, in other words, the opening in Knoxville was in 6 months. We had
Wow.
nothing, so yeah, we were working, 18 hours a day, morning till night. And I would hire interns from everywhere and editors. I think Iris came on it, I think. Many people came on it. Yeah. And so we did it. One day the uh, the chief producer who really I won't say anything about him, but he was not very helpful. Let me put it that way. And he came and he said to me, "What do you think about menus?" The concept of menu had not yet joined
Wow.
interactivity.
Wow.
I'm like, no, 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 we're not a Chinese restaurant. We'll stay away from menus.
Wow. Wow.
Um, yeah, but this change in 1980 was very, and 81 was really very significant. Many things changed. So, and yes, of course, I mean, and it didn't, but the MIT is supposed to be giving us the background hardware. It didn't, so it didn't fully work. Um, and in order to switch from one image to another through a touch, you had to have multiple laser discs because even though the thing about laser discs is it's random access to each frame, but it takes time to get from one frame to another. So you can't have an interactive piece. You're going to wait 5 seconds to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
So they had to have a stack of Laserdisc players and switch between them at the points that we did. So this was quite complex programming, and it's programming I worked for my interactive. I worked with the hardware I worked with for my first couple of interactive video pieces using these ideas.
Yeah.
Um, I made 6 interactive pieces, interactive installations based on this first idea of development over time. Um, we had to write our own software because the MIT guys wouldn't give us theirs in any way. It wasn't any good. But I used their hardware setup, which was multiple laser discs all attached to a single computer and a touchscreen. So I used that. I used that software, and we wrote our own programs for it.
Yeah.
Uh, and and Erl King, well, it was I'm always interested in 19th century classical music, uh, because I was a violinist, and I was always interested in that song, and so I thought it would be very interesting to kind of explore that song, which is based on a poem and violence, or just kind of wandering through different connections with a song in the background, and that's how Erl King got made over the years. It was an incredible battle. I couldn't possibly do it now. We had to invent everything,
Mm. Wow.
and and yeah. So it's not our best piece by far, but it was the first. And that's why the Guggenheim was interested in it, and they ended up acquiring it. So it's in their collection, but they were not interested in the other pieces that I made
Yeah.
after that, which I
We
think are better.
Graham, did you feel any connection to the those performance artists of the 70s, like the Chris Burdens and the Vito Acconcis, and did you have feel any connection to that type of work, or you felt like what
I
you were
was
doing was very
very no,
foreign to that?
no, I was very interested in those things. I knew Chris Burden actually in California and other people who worked with him. Yeah, I was very interested in that. It was, I mean, the environment in Los Angeles, where I was for a few years, was it was very quite unified. I mean, yes, Pat O'Neill was also very interested in that work, and there's a small group of filmmakers and the those artists, and I mean, because I honestly think that because we didn't at that time have the possible burden of wealth in art, that people could be much more integrated with each other than much.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but then obviously money entered the picture, and came to be huge divisions in the art world.
The East Fourth Street location,
Uh,
back in that time, seemed to have been all about this kind of collective philosophy and idea. So could you speak about how you discovered the Millennium as far as East Fourth Street, and obviously it's gone through so many changes, but I am talking about the beginning, the essence, the origin of what that was supposed to be about.
Howard Gartenplan was showing Roberta some of my films. We moved to New York in '78, and he was showing our films. When we made a new film, he'd show them. We were part of that community. Um, we went to those, yeah, I went to those films a lot. It was a real community. There were a lot of filmmakers. Most of the screenings were always crowded. Yeah, it was really a nice community. Howard was really in charge of everything. Yeah, it was not a collective in any way, except one way. He in 19 I guess it was 1973 or something, he decided that we should have a magazine to compete with October because, of course, October was too stuffy, and he wanted something that reflected experimental film. There was no writing about experimental film, none.
I did not know that he was was competing with October. I did not know
Well,
that.
that's how he said it to me.
It's
But I
interesting.
mean, he
Yeah.
didn't really. He knew he wasn't really competing composer with October. But we do know there was no writing about experimental film, except in a very, very few places. Anthology had a magazine, but they hardly ever came out. There were a few writers, and so he wanted to make a place for the writers about experimental film. And so in 1983, he got three editors. Now, Howard was a very interesting guy. He was a filmmaker. He was a curator.
Yeah.
He was very much to himself. He was a kind of a closed book in a lot of ways. Had very few people he was intimate with, um, and he was a bit of a micromanager. But he was not confident as a writer or an editor, or a text editor. So he hired three editors. I was not one of them. I only came on in the third year, and their job was to bring in the texts, edit them, and give them to Howard, who would get the pictures and do the layout and so on for the journal. So I was hired in 1976 for the triple issue 16, 17, 18 with two other editors. And because I'd also written, as somebody had studied philosophy, I wrote about film as well. So I'd been published in the early issues. I think I'm in this third issue. In number three, I have an article.
Hmm.
Um, and so I became one of the three editors. And all we had to do was get people to write for us, read the text that came in, edit them, and hand them to Howard. And this went on for many, many years. That was my job. So it wasn't a heavy job. There wasn't a lot of weight to it. Some years we'd get paid, some years we wouldn't. Um, and sometimes the journal wouldn't come out regularly. It would
Hmm.
be a year between issues because he didn't have the money.
Hmm.
But so I continued with it. Editors changed, and I continued with it until, and it was very, very interesting for me because we were the only game in town, the only place that focused on writing about experimental film, that published writing about experimental film, probably until I would say 1998 or something, 1996 or 1998, when art forums started getting interested in them, the glossies got interested in it, other things came in. So it was a very interesting field for me, and I kept doing it. Then when Howard retired in, I guess, I don't know what year it was, but it was probably 2012. Um, a group of people got together and said, well, we got to keep it running. And so five people each took on one of the tasks or one of the projects of the Millennium, which were the screenings, the journal, the workshop, the equipment, and rental of the space. I said, okay, I'll take on the journal. So suddenly I was a publisher. It really fell on me, and I had no idea what I was signing up for because you have to deal with subscriptions. You have to deal with printers. I never did any of that stuff, but I was doing it. And the other people who said they were going to do things actually didn't follow through.
Mm.
But I kept the journal going myself until the board of directors reformed and it restarted for the first time. So yeah, I kept it going for several years in there. So I was a publisher, filmmaker. I was teaching, of course, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was juggling.
So in a way, Graham, so when you took over the journal, that was a little bit, I mean, there was new technology was around, but the journal, I think at that point was, I imagine, was still only print, not online.
It was a print journal. I put it online. I put pieces online as early as it was possible, probably in the late 90s. Um, but we didn't publish it as a journal online. But there are texts that were put online. I put a lot of it online myself, actually.
And how often it
On the
was,
website.
it was it quarterly when you took over? It was not biannual, it was
Right.
quarterly. How often was it released?
At the very beginning, it was quarterly. It quickly became biannual. Nobody could manage
Because
that.
of the finance? Okay.
Finances, time, work, nobody was paying.
Sure. Sure.
Everybody had to have jobs. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's then it didn't come out regularly. I mean, it did. There were twice a year. He did have subscribers, but sometimes he'd have to make an issue into a double issue, so he could miss one subscription. So yeah, but yes, it continued, and I was with two other editors at the beginning. It wasn't just me, but I was somehow doing the management.
When the pandemic hit, did you have to miss a beat? Did you miss any issues, or could you keep moving? How did you manage the pandemic with getting the magazine released?
We did it the way it's still done. We did it through Zoom and stuff. I mean, we communicated through Zoom. There were printers. Printers were working. We communicated through the editors communicated through Zoom. Lots of people wrote for us. They're very powerful and good writing in that period because people had more time.
Mm,
Yeah, but yeah, we kept going. Have a very nice issue um, about the pandemic where we
I remember that issue. It's a good issue,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. We commissioned people to write to us how they spent, filmmakers how they spent a day.
Yeah.
It's really great, actually. A lot of people. So yeah, so it's continued. I mean, I'm trying to move away so I can have more time to do other things, and it's kind of working.
Hmm. And how has the magazine, the journal adapted to everything so much being online? I mean, newspapers are having so much trouble. How are you dealing with that?
Well, we
How important is it to you to keep the magazine in hard copy print? How important is that to you and you guys?
Mostly it's important to me, and I'll tell you why. We do, as you know, we do screenings. The screenings are always based on articles that are written about in the journal. That's all about experimental film. People don't see the films mostly, so why are they going to read about them? So for me, the most important thing we do, or one of the most important things we do, is these screenings that we do, in three places in the world now. We do it in New York, London, and Paris every screening, and the programming is entirely out of the book. So they have to be. And I think one of the main things we do is we make a connection between the articles. People read the articles and the film, or they see the film and they read the article. We make that connection. And holding the book in your hand, I believe, makes that connection real to you. Who's going to go to the film and then look up online what somebody says about it? Or if you see something online, look everywhere for where the film is. It's very important to me that we have this object that attaches in like a program,
Mm.
and other things as well, attaches to the films and gives, there's not only reviews, but reviews are central, and there are articles about the general issues around. And so I think that connection, I think if we were to give up the screenings, or if the people that follow me were to give up the screenings, there would be no reason to make the book. Um, and the,
How did you find that last screening that I did attend in the fall, I believe, right? 2025 with the War and Pieces series with the Repeat After Me too. How did you find that incredible film? And it ties into the kind of work that you were doing so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was in a gallery in New York.
Wow.
That piece was showing in a gallery, and I went to the gallery, and I thought, it should leave the art world. Because it's so much about cinema and how your relationship to the screen, and how it makes you think about it, gives you this sense of communication with those people who lived through this thing. And yeah, we did it here. We did it in New York. I did it at my school at SVA, where I was teaching at the time. Did it in London. We're going to do it in the second part in London, I think, in next week or week after next, and then we're going to do it in Paris. I think it's really, really an important piece.
It is, and it's important to how you approached it, Graham, by having the public, the audience, participate in this in the sound. It changes. I can speak for myself only. It changes how you think about war and the effects of war. It was something I'll never forget that experience. It was
It's
unbelievable.
absolute. I can't take any credit for that. This was the requirements of the artists who made the film. They told us they wanted the red light. They wanted a certain number of floating mics. They also wanted mics in the front of the room. Yeah, it's their piece. I mean, we were just stage managers basically.
Yeah. And talk about yourself with editing now. With you, I think you've always supported. You like to work with DaVinci. I work with Adobe Premiere. I have to lease the thing for every year. You don't have to pay any leasing fees for DaVinci. Why'd you choose DaVinci over Adobe Premiere, and how happy are you with working and with editing this way rather than on a Steam Deck?
Um, I ran one of my editing career led to me running with a partner a post-production business, where we took in work, edited it, and it was an Avid shop. We had three Avids. Avid is a wonderful film editor. It's most like Avid was developed during the time of the Steenbeck, and it was
Right.
a model.
Time code. Yep. Yeah.
So I became an avid editor for terrible things, TV commercials, stuff like that. But we made money, um, and it was in my fingers. And Da Vinci is closer to Avid
Mm.
to anything else. And yeah, I I'm not a fan of Premiere. My students all use Premiere. I try to use it. Uh,
Mm.
I mean, there's a learning curve. There is a learning curve on Avid, a long learning curve. There's a learning curve on DaVinci, which I'm trying to get back. But once you've got it, it's in your fingers. It's
Yeah.
in your fingers.
Graham, did you work at Sound One before they closed? Did you ever do any work at Sound One Studios?
I cut some films there. I cut
Oh,
some films of
okay.
mine. Maybe Alphabet City was cut there. I can't remember, but I think it was cut in one of those big buildings with editing rooms. I
Hmm.
mean, the producer would rent a room with equipment.
Yeah. Um, How do you feel about AI, Graham? And did you see the recent trailer for this Val Kilmer is going to be starring in a role after he's passed away? Did you see the trailer for that? And how do you feel about AI bringing back deceased actors?
Really have a view about it. I'm sorry. I can't say anything about it. It doesn't particularly interest me. I'm interested in the fact that there's an automatic process between the world and the images.
Yeah, but you embrace artificial intelligence. You're not against it. A lot of film artists are. I personally am not. I have not dabbled with it yet too much, but I'm becoming friendly with Claude, and I think it's a helpful tool. Haven't put my feet in the water yet with AI with as far as editing, but I'm not completely against it. I think it could be another tool.
I have my practice, I have my practice. I do what I do, and I'm not quite ready to undergo major change.
Mm, yeah, but the journal had you said the journal has written quite a few articles and theories, discussions about AI. Correct? Your
We have
magazine.
one guy. We not quite a few. One guy who was my student when I was still teaching has written a couple of articles. He's very, very good. His name is Ari Timkin.
Very tempting.
And another article came in which wasn't quite so good. So yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think there's a lot of issues that one can discuss, but it's just, you can't tackle everything.
Right. Well,
I
so
don't.
I'll keep it. I'll make it more simple. Are you against AI or not? Are you against using AI for your filmmaking or not?
I don't need it. I have my own practice, so I'm not. For me, yeah, it's not very interesting, but yeah, there's a few films I want to make, and I want to make them the way that I know how to do it, and I try my cuts. I look at my edits, and do they make me feel good? Do they appeal to me? Does it work? You
Yeah.
know. So yeah,
Yeah. What is it you're working on now? Is it you just keep making shorts? Are you making a longer piece? Anything you want to talk about as far as what you're working on now or
I'm working on a piece. I don't want to say much about it,
yeah.
but I'm making a 4-minute version that I need to finish in a few days for my friend Abraham Rivette, who's a filmmaker, maybe you know him, who is retiring from his teaching job after 45 years or something. And he asked a number of people to make short films for his closing ceremony. So I'm
Oh
making
wow.
making a little film for him.
And you had told me you just recently retired also from the School of Visual Arts. Yes, you're retired now from teaching.
Yeah, I don't teach anymore.
How do you feel about that?
There was nobody in my department was interested. It was a photo department, and I and a couple of other people taught the moving image, and was mostly photographers, and there were none left. None left. No filmmakers left. So, I had 4 students last year. There used to be 12. Couldn't teach.
I don't understand I don't understand what you mean by that, Graham. What do you mean by there was no students left? No interest? I don't understand what you mean.
No interest in the moving image. It's a photography department. They're interested in photography and I don't know what else, but it's all photography based. And the chairman is interested in photography and yeah. So I mean, I'm not uninterested in photography, but I taught a course about thinking about how to make a film, and they weren't interested in the moving image, so I didn't get any students taking my course.
I'm shocked just because podcasting is so explosive now. Everything on YouTube and these videos, I would have, I'm shocked. I would have thought the complete opposite. I would have thought the youth are interested in making videos more than ever with their cell phones and these endless podcasts. Every day, someone's becoming a podcaster and creating a channel on YouTube. I mean,
But I tell you,
cable television is almost completely out of business now because of all of these social media influencers.
I know, I know. But yeah, no, I think they this is a graduate department. It's a graduate photo department. Um, Hard to see how people can make a living, what space there is for them if if they get a degree in photography. just not attracting the kind of students who are interested in what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, all departments have their practices, but all kind of graduate art departments are suffering. People are trying to find ways to make a living.
Working from home more, would you say? Do you think a lot of people are sort of working towards that kind of idea of working from their house on a computer?
Maybe. I just think they want. I think most people are looking for careers that can support them. And there's this promise, there was a time
Mm.
when there was a period when people thought, I'll become an artist because I'll get rich, sell my paintings for millions of dollars. Uh, and now that path doesn't seem to be open to anybody. But there are paths that are open, become a AI developer and learn software. And there are lots of quite wealthy young people who work for the software industry. Yeah. So that's
Do you still go to the theater, Graham, to see movies? Do you still go to the movie theater? I remember that one time years ago they were shooting the Batman movie outside of your window, and
the,
you were documenting them shooting this whole. They
the,
locked down your street to shoot this Batman scene.
one scene they shot. I don't think it even got in the film. Oh yeah, I do it sometimes. I get press pass to the New York Film Festival, so I go to the press screenings of the whole set, which is a lot. It's a good 10 days of morning to night screening. So that's kind of my movie watching for the year. And I travel and I watch them on the planes. Yeah,
Mm.
my partner's interested in theater. We go to theater a lot, and I go to music a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. How often do you work in your home the journal archive? Talk about how are you archiving the library of all of the issues? I mean, once you had everything in your attic. I remember at one point stuffed up in your attic. Where are you keeping all of your history with the journal, all of the issues?
We're not doing too well at that. I mean, I still have a lot of books here. Yeah, but
So they're not all digitized. All of the issues are not digitized yet.
they were there before we print it. Now they're all digitized because that's how we get the printing done. We send in
Right.
a digital copy, so everything is digital. But it wasn't always true, and they are not. No, to digital, there is no equivalent of a digital copy for the earlier versions when they were print. It was, I don't know quite how it was done, but there's no digital copy, so they would have to be scanned. And yeah, and the binding would break if we only have one or two copies, and somebody has to do it. And we
Mm.
don't have much of it. We have a couple of people who get paid a little, but there's not a staff.
But you do have a copy of since the first issue onward, you do have access to a copy of every single issue of the journal. There are none missing in action.
I have one copy of every issue.
Okay, good. That's
There are
great.
some it's the only copy that I have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. It's almost like a reel to reel 2-inch tape. If you were to open these old journals, you could damage them. In music, you have to bake the 2-inch reel to reel, and you get
Really?
one round at digitizing, and then after that, it dismantles, it crumbles.
Really?
It's interesting how you guys. You know what? I would just hold on to it and keep it climate protected, and I think they'll figure out a way to scan those without damaging them, even if it's a one-shot deal.
Is there somebody that thinks it's worth it?
Yeah, well, of course it's worth it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, somebody has to think that apart from you.
Yeah, well, what about your work, Graham? Do you keep all of your films somewhere? Do you go to get the Harvard Film Archives has that incredible area where you can store your film climate controlled. You don't want to do that. Have you done that with your work?
Anthology has the early work, the and
Mm.
interactive pieces are broken. They don't work, so they
Mm.
don't exist. Um, uh, yeah, there is a copy in the Guggenheim, but I doubt if they could get it working.
Oh, wow.
because it's that hardware is made, it's
Yeah.
made not to last. It's designed to wear out and not last. So to replace it. But all of our stuff is was very specific,
Yeah.
very specific hardware. So yeah, it
You know
doesn't.
what's really, I gotta say what's so cool and great about your journal screenings is you seem to make a point of having a print at least one or two prints screened on 16 millimeter of the works that you represent in your magazine. It's not all digital.
No, it's not.
It's so unique your screenings because of that. Even
Well, the only place we can do that is
at
anthology.
Maya Deren Theater, yeah, yeah, the anthology.
Yeah, and we yes, if there is um, if it was a 60 millimeter original, we try to show that, but that's not there isn't always such a thing. So
Yeah.
no.
Graham, when things moved over to digital from film, did you embraced that pretty quickly? I did. Did you resist that? I mean, Ann Arbor, uh, they've spent many years resisting that, and finally they've overly embraced digital. But you seem to you accepted it right away, huh? You were always okay with new media and
Yeah, I don't have. I mean, I'm interested in the moving image. I'm not interested in grain or pixels particularly. And
that's great.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I love the moving image, and yeah, and you know, I, yeah. No, I don't work in 60 millimeter particularly anymore. Yeah.
Hmm.
So.
How did you have any feelings about Frederick Wiseman's recent passing? And wow, that guy was making films till the day he passed away. He's
Yeah.
quite something.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Him. Well, also Ken Jacobs. Even apparently even in the period between after Flo died, he was spent
Yeah.
that 4 weeks making films, working on
Yeah.
film.
Even during COVID, I spoke with him during the whole COVID pandemic. He was up in his, isolating, still making films. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's yeah. I mean, look, it's to sit down and watch a film take place on the editing table in front of my eyes is my greatest pleasure. There's nothing that occupies me, that interests me
Wow.
more and occupies me more. I've been working on this film for 5 days, and I could easily put in 10 hours, easy.
That's amazing, Graham. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I've been like this for it fascinates me to see the way images affect each other. Not only the ones next to them, but the ones way earlier and the ones way later in the film, and how you line them up to affect what's coming. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's endlessly interesting to me.
Graham, I don't know if you ever experienced this, but sometimes if a work is very personal, if an artist is dealing with material, even on a unconscious level, there could be a resistance, I feel, to getting back at the in front of the editing machine. It's an odd catharsis that happens. It's a weird thing. You've never had that with any works that were very personal, or you're you're sort of vomiting a lot of this material that you're not even you're unaware of. Some of your works, I remember, were extremely personal. Matter of fact, I remember when I was doing the hijack micro screenings, you showed a work that you said you weren't considering showing after that. You were keeping it to yourself. I think it was a part of a two or three films. You were not going to screen them too much. They were very personal,
I
short
don't
films.
I don't remember what it was, but yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, it's a way of thinking.
Say it again.
It's a way of making a film and putting it together is a way of thinking, kind of, or externalizing thought, which you don't really have without externalizing it.
My cat is knocking over everything. Right? My cat just helped me out over here. All right, Graham. Well, this was very simple little chit chat, and
Okay, good.
yeah. Is there anything you want to share with me? Don't think this is. I think you think this is going to be on HBO or something like that. This is not going to go viral. This is me and you and chatting. Maybe I'll put it on my thing. Maybe I won't. But rest assured, I'm not going to try to sell this to whoever's running Netflix right now. This is a very simple thing. I have a lot of respect for you, and I wanted to have a to know more about what you. I learned just by sort of preparing myself. I learned so much more about your love of with cinema and film by doing that. And that was my goal, really. To be honest, that was my goal to learn more about what inspires you. Look at the room behind you, and you're saying you could easily go 10 hours. I can't right now. I'm dealing with material that's very personal, and I do everything in my power to stay away from the editing because I'm a frightened about how personal some of this stuff is that I'm dealing with. So I really enjoy having a talk with you about this kind of stuff. And me and you were comrades in arms with this whole millennium, sort of an endless. It'll be an endless, like the World War One, the war that never ends. It's kind of that's what millennium is. Yeah,
But
you
I
have the
think
name. You have the name.
we
Millennium.
have the name, and I have someone who's now Vince Warren is the I hired him as managing editor because
He's great.
I wanted more time, and he's fabulous, and he's connected with a workshop, and
Oh,
he's good.
interesting.
Yes, and
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
pulling back. I really am.
Yeah, yeah. But Millennium Film Workshop and Journal, Millennium is one of the most important things in my life. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You know, I left music for film and I probably wouldn't have done that if I didn't walk into East 4th Street. East 4th Street to me, after leaving music, was almost like walking into a an underground club where you could sort of get up there, all ages show and play a concert. You know, how what Howard was doing with the open screenings that he inherited from Ken Jacobs was sort of having a place with flyers on East 4th Street where you can just come on a Friday and show whatever the hell you wanted that you were working on for 20 you had 20 minutes and pretty much it was anything goes. And
Brilliant.
I would go out of my way to get there on Fridays. I was going to Purchase Film School. Iris was the dean, or no, I'm sorry, not the dean.
Chairperson.
She was the chair.
Yeah.
But I would always make sure I got to on Fridays. It was the thing I was so most excited about. And the weird thing about what the interesting thing about it is it was like being in a, I describe it like being in a library where you're surrounded by people in the audience who are either showing or just, but no one really talks to each other. You just experience this art and you get the glass of cheap wine that Howard would put. He always greeted you on entry. He said goodbye when you left, and it was such a special,
Yeah.
really special place with the Polaroids by those rundown pre-war bathrooms. It was an unforgettable thing. People who didn't experience East 4th Street lost out, you know, and they can hear these stories because it was something, really something.
Yeah, Roberta and I shot at maybe probably our last film in there after it was cleared.
Wow.
Jay got us in there, and we used the big floor and
Wow.
shot our last film.
Wow.
Great Grandchildren, it's called.
Wow. Graham, go do your stuff.
Okay.
I'll see what I do with this later on. If I do anything, I'll probably just, you know, keep the important moments.
Fine,
I hope
fine
there's
if you fine with me if you don't do anything. I really
maybe I that's kind of what you should pay me. I think that's really what your aim is. I could use some money. Send me a check and I won't do no I'll delete the file. I'll tell
I'm
Claude
not saying it has to be
I
deleted.
delete the file. What's that John Malkovich movie? Burn After Reading? That was a great movie. That was a, Burn
I
Burn
don't think
After
I've said
After
anything.
Seeing.
I don't think I said anything I'm ashamed of. If I look at it, or if you do ever put it out, you better run it by me in case I said
I
anything.
will absolutely, you know. I'm gonna ask for that check that you're gonna pay me, or you give me a free subscription to the journal for 4 or 5 years, and I'll be happy.
I could probably get you a free subscription if you want that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, you could probably do that. You'll think, yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I'm not the boss anymore. I
Oh, wow, yeah,
yeah, I'm just the senior editor.
yeah.
But make sure I have your address, and I'll see if I can get you
You
on.
sent me one last time. Don't worry, but I'm joking. I'm joking. Graham, go take care of yourself. Say hello to your
Okay,
significant other, and thank you
okay.
for the talk. I appreciate it. I love you very much, Graham. You know this, but I
Okay,
will tell you again. I love you very much. You
okay,
always
thank
came to
you.
my hijack screenings. I'll never forget that.
I didn't always go, but I
You
went as
always went
often as I
coughing with
could.
my fog machine. I had you coughing all the time when I put the fog machine, when I was trying to relive my drumming days on stage in the hardcore clubs of Virginia and CBGBs. That's why I used to do that, set that
Really?
smoke machine.
Yeah.
Music, by the way, is experiencing or experienced it before music, right? Before film, the demise of the live experience. There are live shows now, but some of the tickets are $5,000 to $1,000, and if you heard last week, Live Nation and Ticketmaster were just found to have a monopoly, so there was no competition to sort of have better options for shows. So this technology is it's good and it's bad. All right then. Bye
Okay,
bye. Let me see this
thanks for
mess
doing
my
this.
cat made. Take care of yourself.
Okay, thanks. You too, Joey.
Bye.